The Legend of Santa Claus. This is the story of Tanta. Please note that this audiobook is suitable for ages 13 plus only. Chapter 1. Once upon a time, a ridiculously long time ago, in the 18th century of England, Mr. and Mrs. Franson had their first and only child. He was the most beautiful baby boy, with jet black hair and sparkling green eyes. "Goodness, his ears are huge," Mr. Franson joked. "Didn't get them from me." "Well, at least he'll be a good listener," Mrs. Franson laughed. And so they named their son Simon, which means good listener. The boy Simon had everything an only child could ever want. Lots and lots of toys and lots of friends at school. But the older Simon became, the more disconnected he began to feel from the rest of the world. 1 week before Christmas, a 15-year-old Simon and some classmates were walking home from school when they saw a homeless man with sores all over his face, begging on the street. "Please, I'm so hungry," pleaded the homeless man. "Could anybody spare me some change?" Simon's classmate named Peter stopped in his tracks and turned to the homeless man. "You want change?" Peter asked. "Oh, yes, thank you so much, young man," the homeless man replied, holding out his hands. Peter reached down into his pockets. "Well, if you want change, then change," he said, throwing breadcrumbs at the homeless man. "Oh, you nasty little bugger. You know that's not what I meant," the homeless man retorted. The group of teenagers laughed as they walked away. But Simon stayed behind. "No, sir, don't do that," he said, as he watched the homeless man pick up breadcrumbs from the icy ground and place it into his mouth. "Here, you need this more than I do." Simon reached into a carefully tied bag and took out a glittering gold crown. He placed the pound coin into the homeless man's dirty hands and watched as his eyes grew wide in disbelief. "Oh, thank you, young man. May God bless you abundantly. May all your wishes and dreams come true," cried the homeless man. "You're welcome, kind sir," Simon said, gracefully bowing down. "Merry Christmas." Simon skipped away, overwhelmed with joy. It felt great helping others. He quickly stopped by to visit his neighbor's farm before rushing back home. However, when he entered his house, he sensed a feeling of slight tension in the atmosphere. "Where have you been, Simon?" Mrs. Franson asked. "You shouldn't be taking so long to get back home after school." "Sorry, Mum," Simon replied. "I was at the farm with Mrs. Hayes." "Well, your friends stopped by," Mr. Franson said, looking at Simon sternly. "And they said they saw you giving a £1 coin to a homeless man." Uh-oh, Simon knew he was in big trouble. Simon gulped. "You know that money was for emergencies, don't you?" Mr. Franson replied angrily. "I apologize, Father. I felt so sorry for him," Simon muttered. "Well, it's all very well giving away money that you didn't work for, isn't it, Simon? And a £1 coin? I didn't realize that I raised you to be so foolish," Mr. Franson ended, shaking his head. "But I thought I was doing the right thing, Father," Simon cried. Well, you thought wrong, Simon. He's just going to spend the money on rum. That's why he's homeless. Because he made bad decisions. So do me a favor, Simon. The next time a beggar asks you for some change, tell him to get a job, exclaimed Mr. Franson. Yes, father, Simon said, with a small whisper. He fought back the intense feeling of humiliation as hot tears ran down his cheeks, and quietly decided from that day never to help anyone ever again. The next day, Mr. Franson made an arrangement with their neighbor Mrs. Hayes for Simon to work at the farm every weekend. I think it's time that you learn the value of money, Simon, Mr. Franson said. Let's see if you'll be willing to give a whole £1 coin to a bum after you've worked hours of manual labor. However, although it was originally intended as a punishment, Simon loved working at the farm, and it made Mrs. Hayes extremely happy to have some company since she was a widow. After Simon had finished attending to all the sheep, cows, and chickens, Mrs. Hayes would cook Simon the spiciest, most exotic dishes. Where did you learn to make such delicious recipes? And now 16-year-old Simon asked, licking the flavors off of the plate. It's called Joe Loaf Rice. I learned it on my adventures working as a missionary in Africa before I lost my husband. I've been to Ghana, Angola, and my favorite, Tanzania, she said excitedly. Tanzania? Simon repeated, his large ears perking up. Oh, you would love Tanzania, Mrs. Hayes smiled, pulling out the album of photos captured by the camera obscura. And they have gargantuous animals, much bigger than mine. Zebras, elephants, giraffes. Simon smiled dreamily, looking at the photos in awe. Yes, and the people, oh, the people. So warm and friendly, with sparkling white teeth and glowing dark skin. The women are so pretty, you know, and the men have such big personalities. And everybody shares with everybody, even if they have next to nothing. They will always share, said Mrs. Hayes. Simon jumped up. I want to go. I need to go to Africa. Expeditiously. Well, your parents are filthy rich, Simon, Mrs. Hayes replied. So it's perfectly possible. After his shift at the farm, Simon eagerly darted back home. Mom! Dad! Simon called. I've got an announcement to make. Mr. Franson looked up from his newspaper amused. Simon paused for effect. I'm going to Tanzania! Mr. Franson began to cackle. Let me guess. Crazy old Mrs. Hayes has been telling you stories about her African adventures. Yes, Simon replied. And I've decided that's where I belong. In Africa. And that's where I'm going. Oh, really? Mr. Franson asked. And you've shaved enough money to go? Simon hesitated. Well, I mean, I've been working practically for free at the farm, so I was hoping that maybe you could take me to Tanzania and then, just sort of leave me there. Mr. Franson broke out into fits of laughter once again, then was suddenly overcome by an extremely serious demeanor. So, You didn't negotiate a higher wage with Mrs. Hayes as I asked you to. Very bad business, Mr. Franson said, shaking his head and sighing. If only I had another son. Simon, it's dangerous out there, and you're far too young to go, Mrs. Franson added. I don't think you're quite cut out for chasing after lions and dancing with the flies, Simon. But I can drop you off at the fishmonger's down the road if you like, and just sort of leave you there, Mr. Franson chuckled. Feeling embarrassed, Simon quickly scurried upstairs to his bedroom. Allah halaya, you know he's sensitive, darling, Mrs. Franson whispered. She followed after her son into the bedroom and found him lying face down, looking defeated. I'm so sorry, Simon, Mrs. Franson said, sitting at the edge of his bed. Your father was just joking. No, he wasn't, Simon blurted out. Sometimes I feel like he hates me. Nothing I do is ever good enough. If I tell him I did well at school, he says, You could have done better, Simon. If I think I look good that day, he tells me, You look so tired, Simon. And when I feel I've done something right, he replies, You did wrong, Simon. I can never please him. Mrs. Franson put her hand on Simon's shoulder. Shh, she said gently. Listen, Simon, I never told you this, but we are the secret descendants of a well-known ancestor. He was a saint, and his name was Nicholas, or as your father likes to call him, Sinterklaas. And he was the kindest, most sweetest man to everyone he knew. Quite like you, Simon. Simon remained quiet. He was a monk, and he dedicated his life to God and helping the poor. He touched so many lives that when he died, people from all over the Ottoman Empire came to weep and mourn his death, his mother continued. Simon looked up. Wow, so that's why there are so many paintings of him around the house. I can't believe we're related to the St. Nicholas. And you really think I'm like him, Mum? Does that mean I'm normal then? No, you're not normal, Simon. But history makers are never normal. I knew you were special from the moment you were born. And you will make history, Simon, just like St. Nicholas. Mrs. Franson took off her blue, black, and white talisman and placed it around Simon's neck. This was passed down from Sinterklaas, and now it is yours. So no evil eye will ever curse you or make you doubt yourself again. Simon smiled. Thanks, Mum, he said, giving her a hug. Oh my goodness, how long are you going to baby him for? Uttered a voice. Simon looked up to see Mr. Franson standing in the doorway and was instantly filled with indignation. Well, I'm never going to get a hug from you, Dad, am I? You never say you love me. You never say you're proud of me. Maybe you'd be happier if I was dead. And with those words, Simon leaped out of his bed, ran past his father and out of the front door. And Simon kept running and running and running until he found himself deep inside the English woods. He found the lowest tree to climb and rested on its bark. Now, most boys Simon's age would be afraid to be in the woods so late in the evening. But not Simon, for he felt one with nature and one with the starry night sky. I don't belong here on this earth, Simon said sadly, gazing at the moon. Yes, you do, Simon, a voice whispered back. Startled, Simon looked around, wondering where the voice came from. "Who's that?" Simon asked fearfully. All of a sudden, a light was shining brightly from one of the trees. "I'm Sylvana, your ancient ancestor. I've been with you even before your first breath here on earth," the soft voice replied. "Whenever you need me, I will be there. But only when you ask can we truly help. So you must put aside your pride and ask. Okay, Simon?" "I feel so misunderstood," Simon replied sadly. "Don't worry. It's just a little darkness. You will get through this, because it's only a little darkness. Just know that one day you're going to help millions of children get through their darkness too. Oh, and one more thing, Simon." Sylvana's voice seemed to drift closer and closer towards Simon's ears. "Never trust a person who doesn't like avocados. Tread very carefully and always keep the vision before you. Because one day soon you will help children all over the world." Sylvana gently began to sing. "I have faith in your generation, your generation, your generation. I have faith in your generation, you will save our nation, this generation." The light disappeared, and Simon instantly fell into a deep sleep. "Simon! Simon!" A Dutch voice echoed through the woods. Simon slowly opened his eyes. "Dad?" he called back. "He's over there." Simon heard his mother sighing with relief. "I told you he would either be at the farm or in the woods." "Simon!" said Mr. Franson angrily. "Come down from that tree now!" Instantly, memories of the previous day flooded Simon's consciousness. He furiously peeked his head down from the tree and stared at his father in silence. "I think I'll go and collect some berries," Mrs. Franson said, giving Mr. Franson a concerned look. "Just be nice," she whispered, before wandering off to explore the surrounding bushes. Mr. Franson sighed and sat down on the grass beneath the tree. "Listen, Simon, I'm... Mr. Franson wasn't used to apologizing. "Listen, Simon. When I was your age, I was lucky to even get one meal a day. All your grandma and grandpa used to do was pray and talk about how God would send them a miracle. They would never ever save any money or make plans or smart decisions. They just sat around all day waiting for a miracle. It wasn't long till I began to resent them for it. I remember seeing my parents giving their last coin to a homeless man on the street, believing God would bless them for it. And me and my 5 brothers sat by the fireplace on empty stomachs, waiting for God to bless us." Mr. Franson became silent. "What happened?" Simon asked. "We got evicted. That's what happened. All 8 of us thrown out onto the streets. Every day I would knock on door after door, pleading and begging strangers to take me and my family in. 3 weeks later, it was completely by pure luck that a carpenter needed some workers at his shop. So he let me and my family stay in the attic in exchange for our hard labor. He wasn't very nice, and the living conditions were awful. But it's where I learned to make my sledges, and a decade later, I eventually started a successful business. So, if I come across harsh at times, Simon, I'm working on it. I just don't want you to end up in a situation that you might regret. It's a tough world out there, and I want you to make smart decisions, so you never end up like how I once was. I want you to be better than me, Simon. Work hard, and don't feel entitled to anything, because God helps those who help themselves. Mr. Franson looked up at Simon. As he held back tears from falling from his eyes, he managed a small yet sincere smile. "I'm so sorry, Dad," Simon said softly. "Let's go home, Simon," Mr. Franson implored, as he got up and began to dust the dirt off his trousers. But just as Simon was about to make his way down from the tree, an unfamiliar voice boomed through the woods. "Going somewhere, Mr. Franson?" Mr. Franson turned around to see two cloaked men. One had a pistol aimed at Mr. Franson, whilst the other stranger's hand was placed over Mrs. Franson's mouth. "No, don't harm her!" exclaimed Mr. Franson. "I want to know what one of the richest couples in London are doing in the woods so early in the morning," said the robber with the gun. The second robber smiled. "It must be our lucky day." "Please, don't hurt her," pleaded Mr. Franson. I'll give you all of our money. I don't have anything on me right now, but I can lead you to the safe." "Perfect," smiled the armed robber. "That was easy. I didn't even have to ask, and people say that you're stingy. Let's prove them wrong. Now walk." He carefully swiveled behind Mr. Franson, pushing him forward with the gun, which was now firmly secured on Mr. Franson's lower back. "Let go of my parents!" Simon screamed, jumping from the tree onto the armed robber's back. "You little roach!" the robber yelped, as he tackled Simon to the ground. Mrs. Franson let out a weak cry as the second robber tightened his hands around her neck. Mr. Franson found a large rock and attacked the cloaked stranger from behind, making a blow to his still hooded head. The robber screamed in pain, falling down to the ground and letting go of Mrs. Franson in the process. With speed, the couple ran towards Simon. "Dad! Dad!" Simon shouted, as he tried to kick the gun towards his father. "Get it!" But the robber kneed Simon in the gut and quickly seized a hold of the gun. With vicious eyes, he turned towards Simon. "The plan's not planning, and it's your fault." "Time to go back to dust, kiddo," said the armed robber. "No!" Mr. Franson screamed, jumping in front of his son just as the hooded man pulled the trigger. There was a loud bang as Mr. Franson dropped and crumpled on the ground. The armed robber then turned his pistol towards Mrs. Franson, who let out a loud shriek. "Run, Sean!" whispered Mr. Franson in pain. "Run!" Simon got up in shock and stumbled. As he gained momentum, he thought he heard Mr. Franson murmur something which sounded like, "I'm so sorry, Simon," before hearing another loud bang. Chapter 2. 1, 2, 3, drink! Peter boomed. It was a Friday night, and once again, Simon was throwing an all-night rave at his place. "I am absolutely wrecked," Simon said, putting the shot glass down. "I need to get some water. I'm feeling too wavy, mate. And that's probs 'cause you've been drinking from morning, my guy, Peter bellowed. The room filled with laughter. Oi, who fancies another round of snooker then? A 22-year-old Simon went to the kitchen to get some water. He had grown into a handsome young man, with the bright eyes and towering height of a Dutchman, combined with the olive skin and thick dark hair of a Turk. He was an absolute weapon. After that frightfully fateful morning that took place in the woods, Simon instantly became the youngest millionaire in London. Unfortunately, by the time Simon had gotten the police and ambulance to the woods, both his parents were dead, and the robbers were nowhere to be found. Now most of Simon's days were filled with drinking, partying, and more partying. "Are you okay, Simon?" a soft voice asked. To Simon's surprise, it was Olivia, the most sought-after young lady in the local area. Simon smiled. "I'm good, thanks, Liv." Olivia moved closer to Simon. "Shall we take another shot?" "Wahey!" Peter shouted as he danced into the kitchen. "You coming to join the snooker game, Si?" Peter glanced at the counter and grimaced. "Avocados? Gross!" He placed himself between Simon and Olivia and put his arm around her shoulders. She was a petite girl with long strawberry blonde hair that complemented her sugar-white icing skin, sprinkled with cinnamon-colored freckles. She had large, almond-shaped, golden-brown eyes with small, kissable, thin lips. A real English beauty. "You all right, my lang lady? You look absolute fire tonight," Peter said cheekily. Olivia managed a strained smile. "See you later, Simon," she said, breaking away from Peter and exiting the kitchen. "Wow, you are so lucky," Peter blurted. "The pengest girl here, standing this close to you." Peter had a full head of mousy brown hair, complemented by cool blue eyes and a permanently mischievous demeanor. "I wasn't really paying attention," Simon replied. "Eh?" Peter piped back in disbelief. "Well, if you don't like her, maybe you can be my wingman and, shh, she's coming back." Olivia's eyes were completely focused on Simon as she returned to the kitchen. "Simon, could you please show me where the telephone is? I need to make a call to my chaperone." Peter looked at Simon enviously, trying to hide his disappointment. I don't mind showing you where the telephone is, Liv." "Well, it's Simon's house and I'm already in enough trouble. I'm not even supposed to be here," Olivia ended matter-of-factly. "Okay, no problem," Simon said, walking towards the door. He turned to Peter and whispered, "Don't worry, mate. I got you." They fist-bumped each other as Simon led Olivia to the busy dining area. An exquisitely designed gold-flowered telephone box sat on the dark red wall in the corner of the room. Simon put his hand on the wall and looked down at Olivia. "Snuck out again, did you?" "What are you going to tell your chaperone this time?" he asked curiously. Olivia cracked a wicked smile. "What does one really need to say when you have the means to pay?" "Right. Quite true." "Well, Liv," Simon started, "Pete is a really good guy." Olivia let out a small sigh. "I don't care." He had some nerve, moving to me with the most putrid of riz. Ugh, talk about putriz. She giggled and laughed at her own joke. Not even going to lie, Simon, but you're 100% my type on parchment. Simon remained indifferent. Really? That's interesting, he said, slightly backing away. I mean, imagine what a power couple we would be, she said, shifting closer to Simon. And we've got the sixes. You're over 6 foot, and I'm a UK size 6. Wow, a match made in heaven, Simon replied nonchalantly. Well, what do you think about me? She asked, moving her gaze from his eyes to his lips. Simon collected his thoughts. You know, he said slowly, it's crazy to think that if I was a few inches shorter or born with less money, you wouldn't even be giving me the time of day. Olivia rolled her eyes. Oh my God, Simon, who hurt you? I am literally the longest lady in London. Why wouldn't I select a partner with good pockets and good genes? It's just common sense. I mean, like, what? I guess a man with intelligence or kindness isn't a priority for you then, Simon said, shaking his head. Well, I mean, it's an added bonus, but not if it's on an absolute dead ting, she concluded. Simon frowned. Listen, Liv, I've got to go. Olivia put her hand on Simon's chest. Where are you taking me? She asked. Ugh, I'm taking you back to the streets, Liv, he snapped. Olivia's jaw dropped to the ground in dismay. My God, you did not just say that to me. Simon let out a frustrated sigh. Look, Liv, I'm sorry, okay? I'm really, really sorry. But this is not it. As Simon turned to walk away, a few ladies who had been closely watching their interaction gathered around Olivia. What's the tea, Liv? What's the tea? They asked. Oh, did you hear what he just said to me? She cried. He basically called me a 10-pence glizzy gobbler. He did not, gasped the ladies in shock. He absolutely mugged me off, she sobbed. You are beautiful. You are Lengers. And you are a queen, Olivia's friends assured her. I mean, it's giving eye infection. Because how can he not see how perfect you are? Exactly, Liv, the other ladies chimed in. You're like literally so pretty. We all want to be you. Yeah, Liv. I really want to be you, though, breathed Melissa from the back of the group. So much so that I have extremely disturbing thoughts pertaining to you. Specifically, you. Same, her friend Fergie added. Like, I literally go to bed every night, hoping, wishing, dreaming that I could wake up in your body, Liv. And when the sun rises and the sad realization hits that I still haven't manifested my true heart's desire, that's when I start to spiral down into an almost psychotic depression. Olivia looked confused. Oh, wow. Thanks for the comps, guys. I really do appreciate them. But I mean, like, should I be concerned, though, or...? No, don't be silly. Don't be silly. You're my best friend, Liv. And I just love you so much. All the girls agreed. Yeah, Liv. We're your ride or dies, and we all love you. Olivia sighed. Thanks, girls. My self-esteem has taken such a hit tonight, and, well, I just want to ruin his life. We can do that, Liv. We can do that, Melissa from the back concurred. Like, that's literally why we're on this planet, though. Simon couldn't take it anymore. He could no longer turn a deaf ear to their extremely loud and rude conversation. That's it! Stop the music! Everyone stop the music! He bellowed. The live band froze their instruments, mid-note, perfectly in sync. Everybody get out! Simon ordered, swiftly maneuvering around the room and angrily switching on lamps. Whoa, calm down, mate. Just calm down and have a good time, pleaded the boys. It's okay, guys. We can just move the party to my place, Fergie announced. As the guests began to gather their belongings, Olivia and her friends marched over to Simon. I heard a rumor about you, Simon, said Fergie menacingly. Oh, really? Simon replied, looking down at the ladies unimpressed. And what's that? We heard that you got ants in your pants, and you got crabs on your slabs. Yeah, Melissa chimed in. And according to Fergie, you got the lurgy. Fergie smiled. I would go to the doctor and get that checked out, if I was you, before everybody finds out. They began to laugh amongst each other and made their way out of the front door. Simon remained motionless, in disbelief, breathing heavily, with now flushed cheeks. All it took was one rumour, according to Fergie, to completely ruin a person's reputation. In fact, 3 people had already fled from London out of sheer embarrassment. Well, according to Fergie, you're not so perky, he finally said. But they were gone. Intense feelings of distress and shame suddenly overwhelmed Simon. Kicking the dining chair in a fit of rage, he let out a small cry, putting his hands on his head and his forehead against the wall. What is wrong with you, bruv? A familiar voice said. Simon was startled. He assumed all the guests had left, but there was Peter, standing behind him, with his arms crossed angrily. Simon curbed the feeling of humiliation from Peter witnessing him in such a vulnerable moment. I would give anything to have a girl like Liv. Anything. I mean, is there something you're not telling me, mate? Some type of secret you're hiding, Si? Peter said, raising his right eyebrow. Simon looked at Peter confused. What do you mean? Peter slowly slanted his eyes. As in, are you longing for the taste of lollipops and rainbow drops? And are you constantly craving fruit punch? Oh, my goodness, Peter. Is it so hard to believe that she's not my type? Simon snapped defensively. Well, just have some fun with her then and send her my way, Peter demanded. No, Pete. Don't get aggy with me, mate. You know it's not right for us to be leading these young ladies on. Whatever. Liv's mid anyway. Why don't you give that Eugenia from church a chance? She's a nice girl. The type of girl that would stick with you through the storms of life. In fact, I'm pretty sure that her and her sisters all have a crush on you. Man's got options. Oh, you mean snaggletooth, bow-legged and moustache? No thanks, mate. They're absolutely butters. Simon shook his head sadly. He was starting to realize that nobody wanted to build genuine human connections. It was all about appearance, status, and ego. "My parents went bankrupt last week," Peter blurted out. "It's been an absolute nightmare, Si. We've been sleeping in my aunt's guest house, and there's no silk linen. Everything's cotton." "No way. I'm so sorry to hear that, mate. Are you okay? I hope your parents are coping well." "I really miss my family, Pete. You're so lucky that you have each other during hard times," Simon voiced quietly. "Oh, here we go again, playing the victim," Peter jabbed venomously. Simon was taken aback. "Excuse me?" Peter pursed his lips. "Do you hear yourself, Si? Always going on about your mum and dad's death every other day. Do you want to know something? Having parents is overrated. I really don't know what all the fuss is about. We're broke now, Simon, and all my parents do is sit around all day drinking and playing Sudoku. They're absolutely useless. I'd choose getting an inheritance over parents any day." Simon's eyes widened with shock. You don't really mean that, Pete. That's an evil thing to say." "Oh, I mean it. If tomorrow someone offered me £50 to get rid of my parents, I would do it. And I would do it with a smile," he ended. "Get out! Get out! How dare you say these things in my house?" Simon flung open the front door with a shaking hand. Peter hurried to the door, then paused and turned to Simon. "I'm your best mate. Don't you forget it. And I'm going to tell you the truth. Do you remember when we were young and you used to give away all your money to the poor? If it wasn't for me informing your dad about your bad habits, you would be broke by now. I'm always looking out for you, Si. When will you ever do the same for me? Christmas is just around the corner. So, are you going to lend me some money or what?" Simon's temperature exploded through the roof. "Stay away from me, Pete. I don't ever want to see your face again. Be gone!" Simon yelled. It was 3 a.m., and Simon found himself back in the woods, at the same spot where he had lost his parents. He hadn't returned since his parents' death, but tonight he couldn't bear being in that large, empty mansion all by himself. "Mum, Dad," Simon cried out. "I can't do this anymore. Every other night, drinking, partying. I'm barely ever sober, but everyone who comes into my life just wants to use me. Why did you allow me to go through so much pain? I feel so overwhelmed. I can't do this. I don't want to live anymore." Hot tears rolled down Simon's cheeks. He hadn't cried since he was a 16-year-old boy. But here he was, after years of numbing the pain, crying bitterly. He hated Christmas. It reminded him of nothing but past failures and trauma. And then suddenly, he remembered. "Siriana! Siriana!" Simon called. "I need your help." He stood still and waited, hoping that the voice he heard that night as a young boy was real, and hoping that his ancient ancestor would appear and take the unbearable pain away. "Please, God. Mum, Dad, anyone?" But this time, there was no light coming from the trees, and no voice coming from the bushes. There was only silence. A distressed and angry Simon took out a rope from his bag, and with a feeling of hopelessness, he placed his bag on the muddy ground. With rope still in hand, he slowly began to climb one of the looming branches. But just as he placed his foot upon the second branch, Simon heard a rustling in the bushes. Without warning, a huge red deer emerged from the trees, rapidly galloping towards him. Simon was so on the branch that he slipped on the branch beneath him and twisted and fell sideways onto the ground. Simon lifted his head and watched as the beautiful, elegant creature galloped into the night. Simon was shaken, but he decided that it was best not to make permanent decisions based on temporary emotions. It was only a little darkness after all, and if there was one thing that Simon knew for certain, it was that tomorrow the sun would definitely rise again, as it always did. So he made his way back home, whilst downing a huge bottle of rum, and passed out on his doorstep. And as he lay in his unconscious state, he thought he heard a sweet, familiar song ringing in his sleep. And the darkness is close now. Who will rise? And who will choose the other side? Call all the chosen. You and I, you and I have faith in your generation, your generation, your generation. I have faith in your generation. You will save our nation, this generation. God Almighty. God Almighty. The next morning, Simon woke up to hear the sound of a cat purring and rubbing its head against his shoulder. Simon opened his eyes and tried to get up, but it was instant regret. His head was in pain, his stomach was queasy, and overall, he felt like he had been trampled on by a horse. He slowly sat up on the cold, hard pavement and wiped the drool off his face, hoping that not too many of his neighbors saw him. I went way too hard last night, Simon whispered to himself. I can't keep living like this. Suddenly, something caught Simon's attention. The cat was standing on a newspaper. Simon looked closely at what he could make of the article. Looking for missionaries to work in Tanzania. Free food and cheap accommodation. Simon's eyes widened. Africa! He exclaimed. I'm packing my bags. I'm going to Africa. Chapter 3. Thank you, Mr. Franson, the small Tanzanian children chorused. It was another great day of teaching, singing, and clapping. Life in Tanzania, from the scenery to the food to the energy of the people, was simply breathtaking. Of course, it wasn't quite the luxury that Simon was used to, but admiring the wildlife and the famously named lakes, mountains, and trees seemed to make up for it. So far, this truly had been the most peaceful 3 months of Simon's life. Simon, we have 2 more missionaries and a new priest coming this week, Father Alex said. I'm training them to take my place. Oh, so soon? Oh, I'm going to miss you so much, Father Alex. But you had so many applications to get through. How on earth did you whittle them down so quickly? Well, it's quite simple, Father Alex answered. There are many who label themselves good people, but I never take them at their word. Because truly good people usually tend to think they're terrible people, and that's how they remain good people. Father Alex chuckled. Anyways, Simon, you've done such a great job so far. How about you take the rest of the week off? Simon was shocked. Are you sure, Father Alex? I don't mind helping. Don't be silly, Simon. Go and explore. Just try to come back in one piece, he chortled. Simon ran outside, excited at what adventure he would be going on next. Would he finally face off with Mount Kilimanjaro? Simon, Simon, dance! Cheered the Tanzanian students. The sound of local drums and flutes reverberated off the trees. Simon laughed and joined in to match their movements as both the younger and older students chorused.
I'm not crying anymore. I have cried too many times before. I'm not sitting on the shelf feeling sorry for myself. I'm not wishing on a star, hoping luck will come from far. I am going to make the change. I am doing it today. No more crying, 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 no more crying.
Simon collapsed on the floor, laughing with joy. He had little to no rhythm, but it was liberating. No constant competing or feeling the pressure to be perfect. Just delicious food, beautiful scenery, and good vibes. Shortly, he started to see some of the children change their focus and point excitedly towards the opposite direction. Simon got up and followed their fingers with his eyes to see 5 ladies in the distance coming towards them holding baskets, and he was instantly enchanted. The sisters are here, from the Shaka tribe, Ndwele said, appearing behind Simon as if he had read his mind. Ndwele was a young dark-skinned man with tribal scars, healthy white eyes, and an infectious smile. He had been Simon's tour guide, translator, and pretty much go-to guy for anything Simon didn't understand. And now they had become the best of friends. How come I've never seen them before? Simon asked, with his eyes locked in to the woman in the middle. She was wearing a full-length, bright blue dress that complemented her modest curves and sat softly on her alluring, dark brown skin which glistened in the sunlight. Her intricately braided hair whipped and swayed from side to side as she sauntered through the grass with main character energy. Cheekbones lifted to the gods, silently singing songs of praise, as her deep, dark and glittering pools for eyes shone with sweetness, yet fierceness, complemented by full, luscious lips. A real African beauty. They live up in the mountains, so they only come down a few times a year to feed the less fortunate. Their family owns a farm with an extremely large portion of livestock. But they are very generous, so the people are grateful. Ndwele informed. Simon watched as the 5 ladies began handing the children bags filled with meat, fruit, and bread. The students cheered and hugged the women. As the young lady in the blue dress smiled and interacted with the children, Simon was convinced that he finally knew what love at first sight was. I would introduce you, but, the ladies don't like strangers, Ndwele finished. No worries, mate, it's calm, Simon replied. As Ndwele made his way back to greet the women, Simon realized that he had never seen him move with this level of excitement. Ndwele greeted the sisters, and as they began to converse in their native language, Simon tried to push aside the small and surprising pang of jealousy growing within him, when unexpectedly, the lady in the blue dress looked up at Simon. Their eyes locked in, and as they held each other's gaze, he could have sworn that every audible sound became muffled, as if a DJ had switched on autofilter. Yet every visible color in sight danced and screamed louder than ever before. After a few seconds, she looked away, and shortly thereafter, waved goodbye to Ndwele, Pastor Alex, and the children. Simon watched in awe as the women started making their way back towards the mountains. Goodness, that is one bad bee, he mumbled to himself. All of a sudden, Simon saw something glittering in the sand. The sun rays were reflecting off the object and bouncing into his eyes. Simon took a closer look. A lady's earring! Simon picked up the earring and quickly followed after the women, speedily gaining momentum. Wait! He shouted. Wait! Unfortunately, he couldn't quite remember the words in Swahili. As he drew nearer, the ladies halted their pace and turned to face him. Simon waved the earring in the air, causing each sister to re-examine their earlobes. Oh, said the woman in blue, noticing hers was missing. Simon lightly jogged towards her and took a few breaths. For you, my lady, he said, holding up the earring. They locked eyes once again as he carefully inserted the fiddly hook back into her earlobe. Thank you so much, she smiled. I didn't even notice, and they're my favorite earrings. You speak English, Simon said excitedly. I'm fluent in English, French, and German. And of course, Swahili, she replied. Impressive, Simon grinned, holding out his hand. My name's Simon. What's yours? Nice to meet you, Simon, she beamed, shaking his hand. My name is Tanta. Tanta, Simon repeated. The other ladies began speaking amongst themselves in their own tribal dialect. But Simon wouldn't have a clue what they might or might not be saying, because he had finally met the most beautiful woman on earth. Simon began to sing softly. Tanta, the most beautiful name. She's the baddest in the game. I will never run, for I finally found me a sweet one. Tanta chuckled in surprise. Oh, okay. Thank you for that, I think. Sorry, Simon replied sheepishly. I don't usually break out into song. It's just you're so unique and so composed. It just set off a whole symphony within me. Oh, stop it, Simon, Tanta laughed. You are too cheesy. And I don't do cheese, for you see, I'm lactose intolerant. Oh, ba-boom-cha! Simon joked, making a drumming motion with his hands. Good one. Well, hopefully you won't crap all over me. Tanta squealed. I'm screaming. Simon took Tanta's hand and twirled her around. I think we're going to get on really well. Yes. Tanta smiled. He decided to accompany the women all the way back up the mountains and help carry their baskets. Oh, thank you so much, she said giddily. So, how are you finding your time here? I'm having the best sabbatical, Simon gushed. I've officially come to paradise. Really and truly, Tanzania has my heart. Tanta giggled. Tanzania? Or are you talking about lasagna? Pardon? Replied Simon. Whatever do you mean? Tanta slowly enunciated. It's Tanzania. Oh, sorry about that. Honestly, so sorry, cringed Simon. No big deal, Simon. Everybody gets it wrong, Tanta reassured. Tanzania, Tanzania, Tanzania. Now, how about that lasagna then? Tanta giggled again. Would you like to have dinner with us? I can make you some ugali or walina maharaj. Maybe Zanzibar pizza? Ooh, I'll take the pizza, please, Simon said with a slight skip. But mine won't have any cheese. There was already enough cheese on that a cappella tune that wobbled from your throat earlier. Are you not embarrassed? Ouch! Bit harsh. I feel personally attacked. Well, that's the last time I'll be busting out into a random song. Praise the Lord, for he answers prayer, Tanta exclaimed. They both broke out into more fits of laughter before Tanta cracked a huge smile with a wink at Simon. And they babbled and jested and guffawed the rest of the way up the mountain. As the weeks went by, Simon and Tanta drew closer and closer. Simon would teach the children during the week, then spend the weekends dancing with Tanta by Lake Manyara, or reciting poems by the baobab tree, then sharing stories with Tanta's tribe. One evening, Tanta took Simon's hand and sat him down on the luscious, firm turf. Do you see this wonderful combination of thick, soft grass and hard, solid ground? She asked. Simon watched as Tanta rested her head on the vibrant greenery. I bet if everybody in the world slept on the grass, all their back pains would disappear. Simon lay his head next to hers. It is pretty comfy. Of course, it wouldn't be very convenient if it was raining. Tanta laughed. That's what these huge leaves are for. To shelter us from the rain. We're supposed to live like this, Simon. We're supposed to be one with Mother Earth. To live any other way for too long brings great unhappiness. Simon nodded. Well, I have to admit that being here literally cured my depression. I do miss the city life at times, though, with all its comforts. You have to have a tough skin to survive in London. No time to pity oneself. A just get on with it mentality. And all the people rushing around gives you a sense of urgency to get to the top of the food chain. Get rich or die trying. Simon turned to Tanta and saw a pleasing face gazing back at him. Her skin was shimmering in the sunlight, and her gorgeously dark eyes sparkled. She looked like an absolute goddess. This was the moment. Simon tenderly touched her cheek and slowly leaned in for a kiss, when all of a sudden, out of nowhere, a fly landed on his lip. "Get off! You demon!" yelped Simon. As he rebuked the fly, he accidentally punched Tanta in the process. "Ow!" Tanta screamed. "Oh God! Oh God! I'm so sorry, Tanta. I'm sorry. I'm really and truly sorry." "It's okay," Tanta laughed. "I appreciate the apology. I guess there's a negative side to nature after all." She shrugged. "I'm really, really sorry, Tanta," said Simon, affectionately putting her head in his hands. "Are you okay?" "So sorry." "Why do you always do that?" Tanta asked. "Do what?" Simon replied. "You always over-apologize. I mean, I hear you saying sorry at least 15 times a day." Tanta observed him closely. "Oh yeah, I guess I do. Sorry." Simon put his hand on his mouth. "Oops." They giggled. Simon leaned up against a blossoming tree. "I suppose my whole childhood I felt so much pressure to be perfect. And as I grew up, I felt that if I ever did anything wrong, or even made the slightest mistake, then I would get rejected. And eventually, I always did, especially when they no longer have use for you." "You're a people pleaser," Tanta nodded. "I'm so sad to hear this. But those people didn't really value you, Simon. They just wanted to control you, so they could manifest off of your good energy." "Well, to make things worse, I caused the death of my parents by running away. The last words my father said to me was, 'I'm sorry, Simon.' Every day I'm filled with so much guilt, shame, and regret." Simon clenched his jaw to hold back the tears. "I'm sure it wasn't your fault, Simon. And I know that your father would be so proud of the person that you've become today. Plus, we're not going to reject you, Simon. You found your tribe. We are your family now, and we'll have your back no matter what. All we ask for in return is loyalty," she ended. "I promise you, Tanta, I will never betray you or the tribe," he answered back earnestly. "Tell you what," Tanta said with a twirl, "for the next 24 hours, you are not allowed to say sorry." Simon laughed. "Okay, I'll try." "Good." And Tanta found a fruit on the ground and smeared it on Simon's jacket. "That's for the fly." "Hey," Simon replied, "that's gotta leave a stain." "Aw, I guess you don't look so perfect anymore." "Well, thank goodness it's not so perfect day," she said. "Not so perfect day," Simon repeated. Yes, not so perfect day. Not so perfect day. Sing with me. Not so perfect day. Simon began to beatbox, whilst Tanta held up a branch to her lips.
Tum 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 ta taka tum 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 ta taka
Not
tum
so
tum
perfect day.
tum ta taka tum tum
Bring the beat back. Not so perfect day. Lord knows through all the pain and the tears we grow into a most charming art display. Tanta bubbled with joy as they chuckled in unison. Yes, yes! Calling, perfectionists all around the world, she announced, as if speaking to an unimaginably colossal audience. You are officially invited to come and celebrate Not So Perfect Day. Come and look at the trees and see how every branch is shaped differently from the other. Or how about the flowers, which are so wonderfully designed, with different sized petals and varying shades of color? It's not so perfect day. And on this day, you don't have to apologize, because everybody here is making mistakes on purpose. Simon laughed. Well, that's technically impossible. But Tanta, I love you. And with those words, Simon swept Tanta up in his arms and kissed her underneath the African setting sun. And they sang, and they played, and they danced, barefoot on the ground, all while intentionally making mistakes on purpose before falling asleep underneath the twinkling, towering trees. Chapter 4. After a few months, Tanta and Simon became husband and wife and started making plans to move back to England. I'm so excited to visit your home country. Let's raise our toast to London, the most famous city in the world. Tanta spun around the room. And don't forget, you're going to be living in my mansion. Our mansion. They smiled and embraced. Tanta and Simon spent one last Christmas in Tanzania before booking their ship. But Tanta's family, who had basically adopted Simon as their own, were extremely troubled. We hope you're not going to be gone for too long, Tanta's mother said sadly. Tears were flowing between all as they said their goodbyes to her family and to the rest of the tribe. Tanta and Simon gathered their remaining resources that they had accumulated in Tanzania and decided to spoil as many children as they could with gifts, food, and necessities. And oh, how the children wept. Don't worry, we'll be back, Tanta said, comforting the children. But when will you be back? One of the children asked, with a snotty, tear-stained face. Tanta looked up at Simon. I don't know. Simon? Simon didn't want to disappoint. We'll be back. Next Christmas, he asserted. And so it was. Simon and Tanta moved to London, where they marvelled and gazed at the Big Ben and snapped photographs by the Tower Bridge. They took out their spectacles to get a closer view of the guards marching outside Buckingham Palace and cheekily mimicked their movements. And Simon showered Tanta with many intricately designed gifts and bought all the latest inventions. But everywhere they went, they couldn't help but notice people staring with shock and dismay. It's because we're exceptionally good-looking, Simon assured Tanta. Tanta looked up at Simon quietly and managed a small smile. Yes, I'm sure that's what it is. Every Christmas, just as they promised, Simon and Tanta turned to Tanzania with gifts upon gifts for the children. And these gifts would get a little more extravagant each time as Western society continued to advance. But as the years went by, Simon and Tanta started to notice a change in the children's attitudes. "This is not really my style," said the little village girl with a scrunched up nose. She dropped the brand new shoes on the ground. "Do you have anything in red?" Simon frowned. "That's all we have, I'm afraid." "We heard people in London are wearing top hats. We want some top hats too," demanded one of the village boys. The children began to chorus his sentiments. "Top hats are for grown-ups," Tanta replied. "And what do you need them for in such hot weather anyway?" "Well, you could at least bring us something that's trending," snorted the little Tanzanian boy. "Oi! Say one more word, and you won't be getting anything next Christmas," warned Simon. The little boy looked at Simon defiantly. "One more word," he said, and stuck out his tongue, running away giggling. Simon was in disbelief. How ungrateful! They won't be laughing next year. So Simon began to write a list of all the children who were thankful and all the children who were unthankful. "What are we going to do with all these leftover presents?" Tanta asked. Simon sighed. "We might just have to return them back to the store," he said. "Or maybe we can give them to Father Wakefield. I heard he's going to India. There are plenty more children all over the world that need presents." Simon collected his thoughts. True. Father Wakefield actually asked if we'd be interested to go along to India with him. Tanta hopped out of the chair. "Great, let's go," she said rather zealously. Simon looked closely at Tanta. "You're not happy in London, are you?" Tanta looked away. "You've shown me a life of entertainment and luxury, and it really does feel like a dream. But I..." Tanta couldn't find the words. "Anyway, Simon, don't worry about me. I'm an assassin. I can face any challenge that life throws at me." "I know. That's why I married you. But you don't have to be strong all the time, Tanta. I can be strong for the both of us." Simon came to stand beside Tanta as she gazed through the window and put his arms around her waist. "You know, after my mother gave birth to my 4 siblings, before my parents separated, there was a long drought in Tanzania that destroyed so many crops and wiped out much of the livestock. At that time, my mother discovered that she was pregnant with me, and she and my father were very anxious, as they barely had 1 meal a day. So she secretly planned to have an abortion." Simon gasped. "Well, thank goodness she changed her mind." "She didn't, Simon. She went through with the abortion." Tanta winced. She took the last of the herbs. "But that's not possible. How can that be?" he questioned. "She had conceived with twins, Simon. And she didn't even know it. My twin died, but I survived." A single tear rolled down Tanta's cheek. "Wow." Simon shook his head in disbelief. "You really are one special woman. I was so ridiculously unhappy before I met you, and you saved me, Tanta. So I think it's time to show you off to the rest of the world. Let's go to India." And so it was. Next stop, India. And they danced with the beautiful mahogany children, ate deliciously spicy food, and meditated by the river Yamuna after gazing in awe at the Taj Mahal. Well, after those magical nights in India, Simon and Tanta were inspired to go to a new country each year. And everywhere they went, they would shower the children with gifts and treats. So much so that they started to gain a reputation. The tabloids were obsessed with Simon and Tanta's every move, and impoverished children all around the world would cross their fingers and hope that Simon and Tanta would visit their city next. "They're coming to town!" the children would sing, and because Simon and Tanta were always together, they eventually merged their names as one. "It's Simon and Tanta," they sang. "It's Santa!" "But you better not be rude or ungrateful," the children whispered, "or you'll get nothing." Simon and Tanta brought much joy and entertainment everywhere they went, and many benefited and profited off of their existence. But as the years went by, Simon and Tanta began to grow weary of the constant moving around. Moreover, as motor cars were becoming more and more accessible, the late Mr. Franson's sledge business began to severely decline in sales. As Simon and Tanta boarded the ship back to London, a 31-year-old Simon realized he had been extremely preoccupied about the future of his business. Simon put his hand on his neck and gasped, "My chain! Where is it? Where's my lucky talisman?" He patted his hands over his body. "Tanta, have you seen it? You know, the one my mum gave to me before she died." "I don't know where it is," Tanta replied. "Maybe you put it in a suitcase?" Once Simon and Tanta boarded the ship, they began looking carefully through each of their belongings. But as they checked and rechecked their bags, they began to notice the sky was getting darker, the wind was growing stronger, and the waves were climbing higher. "A storm is brewing," Simon muttered, with an intensely fixed glare out of the window. Simon and Tanta exchanged worried glances, and as night descended, their worst fears came to pass. No chain was found, but rearing its ugly head was a propelling storm in full force. The aggressive waves began violently tossing the ship from side to side, whilst the tempestuous wind pulled the sails back and forth in every direction, seemingly impelled to dance with the now startling lightning strikes. "Prepare for safety!" the crew shouted, tossing out life jackets. All of a sudden, pieces of metal and wood started breaking, and holes began to indent into the ship's floorboards. The ship was sinking. "Simon!" Tanta screamed, trying to reach for his hand, but the wind and the water pulled her in the opposite direction. "Tanta!" Simon cried out. "I love you!" But before he could hear her response, the sail of the ship swung in Simon's direction, knocking him over the boat into the frosty Black Sea. Chapter 5. Simon slowly opened his eyes. "He's waking up," a voice said. But there was something strange about the voice. It was almost like several voices in one. He seemed to feel this inconceivable euphoria and peace. Simon fully opened his eyes to see several glittering beings with pleased faces looking down upon him. He's awake! One of them exclaimed, and instantly the space was filled with applause. Simon pushed himself up and realized that his head felt foggy and light. It was almost as if he was floating. Whoop, whoop! One of the glittery beings cheered. Their wings were glowing and flashing like LED lights, displaying every color of the rainbow, and their thick, bouncing hair was blowing perfectly in an ostensibly invisible wind. Beneath their extravagantly large eyelashes were eyes that shone with both rage and pure love. "Well done, Simon! We're so proud of you!" announced the familiar voice. Simon recognized the voice instantly. "Sylvana!" he called. He glanced down and gasped. He really was floating. The applause died down simultaneously as Sylvana appeared before him. "You passed every test on Earth, and now you're kind of a legend here, Simon. You and your twin soul Tanta. Absolute game changers." Sylvana was the only being that visibly differentiated from the others. Instead of wings, she had two exquisitely beautiful stumps for arms, complemented by long platinum blonde hair and gleaming grey eyes. And in her sequenced pink dress, one couldn't help but notice that one of her stumps was slightly longer than the other. "Yes," another glittering being agreed. "So much so that we even changed a few rules up here because of you, honey." Simon shook his head in disbelief. "Wow! I'm so honored. Thank you. So, this is heaven?" A tall, shimmering being with bright green hair and glorious flashing disco wings stepped forward, and instantly a spotlight shone upon him. "Allow me to explain," he trumpeted. All at once, poles began to lower down from what appeared to be a heaven above, and down came more glittery beings with long flowing light grey dresses and bright blue wings, bending, twisting, and turning artistically around the poles. Soon, music began to play, seemingly from nowhere, yet everywhere at the same time. Simon felt the vibrations of the bass permeate through his entire soul. For you see, the bass is everything, for the bass is life. And this bass went hard. So the angels began to nod their heads and move their body to the beat.
Let us make man in our image.
We are the cherubim from a higher heaven. We worship only him and her. There's two of them. Stop pretending that we don't exist. Arthritis. A pride so swollen, it's hurtful. Like an atheist explaining the creation going purple. If your life sucks, perhaps just consult us. Our help's only consensual. We are asexual. Flap, 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 flap. Babes, you're just made of dust, so we're sending all our love. entrance to the stage. Category, well behaved. All the demons get well jelly, cause angelic doesn't age. I float, I flap, I click and clack, but when you speak I just hear quack. Bit the apple, broken back, your daddy isn't coming back. Shapeshifted to a human look, I lost one sock, I was too shook. I'm starring in the best sold book, but yet my chickpeas stay uncooked. I'm humble, bada yada yada. Stop it, love, I can't be cuffed. Like Nigella, heat that pate, warm it in that microwave. We're too holy for the world. The wing laid with emeralds, giving hot the herald forever. We're too righteous to be touched, babes, you're just made of dust, so we're sending all our love. We're too holy for the world. The wing laid with emeralds, giving hot the herald forever. We're too righteous to be touched, babes, you're just made of dust, so we're sending all our love. Once again, the place was filled with the most elating cheering and applause. Well, of course they're going to clap for themselves, said Sylvana, rolling her eyes. Guys, we have 2 centuries of souls to get through. Can we please stop with the constant singing? See, this is why the Most Highness put me in charge. Well, the Most High loves our singing, the green-haired cherubim replied. Sylvana sighed. Simon, allow me to give you a more cohesive summary. As you know, I'm your ancient ancestor that was assigned to you during your time on Earth. Since we successfully completed our mission, I've been promoted to Ascended Master. Oh, congratulations, Sylvana, Simon grinned. We made it to heaven! Woohoo! Sylvana smiled proudly. Thank you, love. But this isn't even heaven. It's purgatory. And in order for you to make it to heaven, you need to get through all 12 dimensions, starting at 3 and ending at -9. You've already completed 3 dimensions, so well done. Thanks, Simon replied. Don't worry. You'll get all your memory back. It's just taken you a wee while to adjust, because you've moved from such a low vibrational dimension to a much, much higher one. Your soul is in shock. Her earnest exterior intensified. Now, listen very carefully, Simon. We've allowed you to skip the queue of souls due to the importance of your mission. Usually, after we pass judgment, we send the good enough souls straight to Dimension 0. We call it the bus stop. It's where souls can chill for a few decades until they're called to reincarnate back into the dimensions. You just left Dimension 1. The bus stop is Dimension 0, which means that your next designated dimension is going to be Dimension -1. Do you get it? Simon tried his hardest to comprehend all that was being said, but a lingering fogginess still remained. Let me help, Sylvana said, waving her right stump. Immediately, an image of Tanta came up on a projection. Remember this lovely lady at least? Simon crooned. My Tanta, he said. Yes, she's waiting for you at the bus stop. Now, we've decided that due to your dedication to helping so many little ones on Earth and your commitment to staying faithful to your twin soul in a society that didn't understand you, you can skip the reincarnation process. Ariana paused for dramatic effect. You never have to reincarnate again. You'll never have to be a wee baby ever again. And you don't have to go through all those dimensions to get to heaven. Oh, so I'm going straight to heaven then? Simon beamed. Oh no. Instead, you will continue to deliver presents to children all over the world, she finished. The room was silent. Oh, wow, Simon said with slight confusion and disappointment. I get to keep working. Thanks. Exactly. And when I say the world, I'm referring to Dimension 1, of course. To start off with, anyways. We're going to give you the gift of super flexibility so that you can enter into all types of premises. And we'll also enchant your transport with super speed, so all the presents will be delivered on time. And your helpers, the elves, will have magical powers to conjure up unlimited resources for yourselves, squealed Sylvana. Oh, wow, okay. I'm well chuffed, now that you've explained it, Simon gleamed. Good. But there is one condition. You'll get free housing, free food, and free transport. The only thing I'm not allowed to provide you with is money, Sylvana disclosed. But your helpers will be able to make any gift that you, Tanta, and the children desire. Well, that sounds great, but surely we don't need money anymore, right? Simon questioned. Wrong. The bus stop looks exactly like a future version of Dimension 1 and runs on a similar ecosystem. People still work and have to pay for things. And the environment cleans itself. But there is still a conflict every now and again. In fact, I think two ladies were arguing over a designer dress the other day at the shop. And oh, the souls dress impeccably over there. So it's by far not a perfect dimension, 'cause it's not heaven, but it's way better than Earth. That's why we call it the bus stop. You can rest a little bit more than usual, but we can't let you get too comfortable, or your soul will never grow, and you'll never want to leave. So every now and again, you might just get a random cake thrown in your face, literally out of nowhere. Sylvana and the angels began to cackle. Right, Simon said, rubbing his head and trying to absorb all the information. Don't worry, you'll get the hang of everything. All you have to do is download the app. Sylvana tossed a mobile phone at Simon. Simon caught the strange device and inspected it. What is it? He asked. Oh, it hasn't been invented in D1 yet, has it? D4- are miles ahead as per usual. This is a cellular mobile phone device. Don't worry, Simon. As soon as we get to the bus stop, the mobile chip inside the cellular phone will activate and download all your memories from the clouds. Just stand underneath a cloud and tap the mobile phone on your third eye. You will automatically remember all your lifetimes and have an instant understanding on how to navigate life at the bus stop. Sylvana smiled. Ready to go? All of a sudden, Simon heard strange noises coming from what seemed to be the next room. It was a mixture of booing and peculiar animal noises. Simon was filled with terror. What are those noises? He asked. Oh, child, one of those rotten humanoids that was constantly giving everybody a hard time on Earth is currently being judged, answered one of the angels. Sylvana chuckled. The seraphim with the 4 beastly heads are greeting him with boos. They're sending him back to D1 to repeat the lesson again. He's going to be living hell on earth next lifetime. Sorry to that man, the cherubim laughed. Simon noticed that their wings no longer emanated lights, but had now taken on a more feathery and matted look, with intricate details of different pastel shades on every strand. And slung across their shoulders and hips were harnesses which carried various types of weapons. Talking about sorry, Gabs, my sweets, I couldn't help but notice, lately, that the edges of your wings are declining. No shade, remarked the green-haired angel. Angel Gab's jaw dropped to the floor. No shade? Mac, you just threw the whole tree. Take several falls. I'm only trying to help. I mean, you noticed, didn't you? How good I look. Angel Mike said, posing in various positions. I just went to get a new wing installation and I am literally slaying. Angel Gabs rolled their eyes. Ooh, child. Well, you do you, honey. But I'm not into fakery. I'm all natural. Wing laid by the gods. All I need to do is apply a little touch of edge control. Edge control? Angel Mike let out a loud, booming laugh. You have to actually have edges to use such. Oh, by the way, Siriana, can you please remind the Most Highness that I'm starting that new charity organization? Oh, really? Which one? Siriana asked. It's called Save the Edges Foundation. Angel Mike answered, slowly turning his head towards Angel Gabs with a mischievous grin. Angel Gabs drew out their sword. How about you save yourself from being a side dish on a plate of chicken and waffles? Oh, please, Gabs, I taught you everything you know, smirked Angel Mike, carefully pulling out an extravagantly bedazzled sword from his back shoulder harness. Both your wings will be bald by the time I'm through with you. Okay, Simon, I think it's time to go, Siriana yelped, waving her stumps. And just as the two angels' swords were about to clash, Simon and Siriana disappeared. They landed outside the front door of what looked like a gigantic mansion, painted bright red and gold, complemented with dark green leafy vines, which cascaded down from the roof to the top of the front door. Welcome to 1010 North Pole Street, Siriana said proudly, pointing to the huge doorpost. On either side of the pathway, hundreds of flowers from multiple colors and species were budding and blooming as bees and butterflies danced and nested among them. And all the vividly blue butterflies came to circle around Siriana, as if to give acknowledgement and appreciation to her existence. Stand just over here, please, Siriana said, forcing Simon's feet to move with the power of her mind. Perfect. Just there. Simon looked up and found he was standing underneath a giant cloud, shaped in what appeared to look like a kissing face emoji. Simon observed as the cloud-shaped heart slowly floated away from its companion's lips. In just a few seconds, you should be able to remember all of your past lives. Just tap the phone in the middle of your forehead, Siriana instructed. Simon did as advised, and once the mobile phone touched his third eye, hundreds and thousands of images began to race through his brain. Feelings of sadness, grief, and disappointment, yet excitement and hope, briefly infiltrated his temple. All of a sudden, he felt a bright blue light penetrate the top of his head, as if a key had unlocked his crown chakra, taking away all feelings of disorientation and confusion. The blue light slowly began to descend through each energy center in a pillar formation, gently unlocking each chakra. As the light targeted his third eye, he finally understood all his unanswered questions, and the deepest, darkest secrets of the universe were discreetly revealed to him. It then trickled down into his throat chakra, finally giving him the complete confidence to speak and express himself unapologetically. The light then traveled down to his heart chakra, and all the rejection and disappointment from past lives quickly dissolved, now replaced with pure, unconditional love. Next targeted was his solar plexus, where his feelings of anxiety and depression were replaced by strength and steadfast self-belief. Next was the sacral chakra, which was blocked by lifetimes of sexual trauma, guilt, and shame, now replaced by an immovable sense of self-worth, self-acceptance, and an overwhelming inspiration to be creative. Finally, the blue light finished at his root chakra, where persistent feelings of inadequacy, fear, and a lack of motivation was replaced by the most delicious feeling of power, independence, self-assurance, and an unshakable faith. Simon felt like a superhero. Simon felt like a god. It was the most incredible, exhilarating, and euphoric feeling he had ever experienced. In 3, 2, 1. Sylvana counted, and all at once the blue light dissipated. Simon inhaled and exhaled heavily. That was incredible. For a second I felt invincible. Simon put the mobile phone device back onto his forehead, hoping to relive the experience once again. Unfortunately, you won't feel like that again until you're back in heaven. That was just a wee taster. But the good thing is, your gifts have now been unlocked. Let's test them out, shall we? Okay, Simon. How about you let yourself inside the house? Sylvana suggested. Sure. Where's the key? Asked Simon. Oh, we don't use keys here. It's all voice activation. But don't worry about that for now. She pointed to the roof. I dare you to climb down that chimney. Simon was just about to protest when a huge surge of adrenaline instantaneously overtook him. Easy, he replied, and jumped onto the window ledge. Simon began looking for anything protruding or any slight openings to grab onto, be it bricks or hooks, and rapidly began to climb upwards, diagonally and side to side, finally grabbing onto a pipe and going up and up till he was on the roof. Simon felt untouchable. He felt so light, but yet so strong. He executed a perfect cartwheel, and then a double cartwheel, and then a triple cartwheel, followed by a front flip. Wahey! Simon laughed, feeling drunk on the adrenaline. Next task was the chimney. He looked down the chute. It was an extremely constricted hole, but Simon had this confident inner knowing that he could achieve getting through. He poked his arm inside the hole and automatically felt his muscles begin to contract, squeeze, and shrink. Whoa, he said, bringing his arm back out and watching his arm return to its normal shape. The blue veins in his arms were still protruding slightly from the contraction. Okay, he said, taking a deep breath. Let's do this. He jumped into the chute, feet first, and let go of the top. And just like a cat, he compressed and squeezed his way down until his feet found the bottom of the fireplace. Landing in a crouched position, Simon noticed 2 pairs of feet standing outside the entrance. Simon! A familiar voice called. Simon clambered out of the fireplace and saw Tanta looking all enlightened and radiant, dressed from head to toe in champagne brown. Tanta! He cried, and he swept her up in his arms in a long embrace. I missed you so much, she swooned as he twirled her around. Simon gently placed Tanta back on the ground. Do you remember everything? She asked. Yes, I remember everything, answered Simon. Well done, Simon. You broke into the house in 57 seconds. But you're going to have to work on it, Siriana said truthfully. Well, I would have done it sooner, but my shoes nearly got stuck in the chimney, he argued. Siriana collected her thoughts and turned to Tanta. Perhaps you can design an outfit for Simon? Have you been practicing with your gifts, Tanta? Oh, yes, she replied excitedly. Tanta raised her hand, and with her index and middle finger tightly pressed together, she began to draw an oval shape in the air. And as she drew, fluorescent yellow markings fashioned through the air. Fashioned through the air. Once she was finished, she put her hand down and stepped back to admire a newly designed two-dimensional sketch of a flowery vase. Then Tanta put her finger on the tip of her nose. Luska nushka, she said, followed by a gentle blow in the air, and they watched as the two-dimensional vase fragmented into millions of molecular light ions, then rapidly reformed into a three-dimensional drawing of a vase, with the exact measurements in height, width, and length marked on all sides. Simon walked around, carefully inspecting the vase. Nice, he said, attempting to touch the live drawing. But all he could do was grasp at the air. Tanta can design the Christmas presents, but only the elves can bring them to life, Siriana explained. But this will make the gift-making process so much easier for them. It's amazing what one can do when all your chakras are aligned. I mean, who even needs arms when the mind is so powerful? Siriana smiled. Oh, by the way, welcome home, Simon. For the first time since his arrival, Simon closely observed his environment and saw the most intricately designed, idiosyncratic pieces of furniture he had ever witnessed in any of his lifetimes. It's as if all the chairs, tables, and ornaments had been sculpted in a pottery class, with little dips, bumps, and scratches, covered with brightly coloured, fresh paint. Giant crystals, such as rose quartz, amethyst, and bloodstone, were placed in several areas of the house, complemented by the pleasing aroma of minty Palo Santos wood wafting through the air. The fresh smell of incense was accompanied by the relaxing sound of bells, wind chimes, and sound bowls quietly ringing through the atmosphere. And laid out on the tables were huge plates of assorted salted dried nuts and honey and cinnamon coated dried fruit. Simon grabbed a funny-shaped piece of glazed ginger and popped it into his mouth. I love it here already. Everything is so imperfectly perfect. Yes, wabi-sabi, said Siriana. Now, you can find all your important documents on the app, including your passport to other dimensions. So keep it safe. Siriana looked at the clock. The elves should be here any time soon. But before they arrive, there's one more important thing I need to show yous. Siriana floated towards a large, bright green door behind the sitting room couch. Crop and rotate, she commanded. The door instantly decreased in width, bent in half to the right, and spun like a wheel before returning back to its vertical state. Smoke emanated from behind the door as it unlocked and slowly opened, revealing a long red and white stick, which resembled a candy cane, sat up comfortably in a snug velvet bed, like a watch inside of a gift box. Siriana set her eyes on the stick and telekinetically levitated it out of the cupboard. This is the dimension stick, or as we like to call it, the ship stick. It will open up a portal and let you travel between dimensions. Simon and Tanta exchanged quiet glances. Oops, sorry guys. That's how you died, wasn't it? On a ship? Eek! Well, you'll be pleased to know that after your ship sunk, the humanoids in D1 were inspired to make an unsinkable ship. They're working on it right now. Oh, well, I'm glad something good came out of it, praised Tanta. Sylvana pulled a face. Yes, great entertainment and beautiful gowns. Anyways, look carefully, she said as the stick spun slowly in a circular spot. The red and white striped stick had numbers ascending from 3 at the bottom to -9 at the top, before the stick curved like a candy cane. And the numbers were written in white italics on the red glittery horizontal bars, whilst the white sections were decorated with a small gold thumb-shaped button which connected to each number. Use the stick to travel to D1 on Christmas Eve. And since you're immortal now, you're welcome to travel to other dimensions once you've finished working your Christmas shift, just in case you ever get bored. Yeah, I'm well up for that, Simon nodded. Just be careful that you don't end up in a war zone or something. If you check the app, you can find out all the tea on each dimension. In fact, I think D2- is having a civil rights movement. They believe that bow-legged people are superior to the rest of civilization. Sylvana shook her head and chuckled. By the way, you're welcome to change bodysuits when you travel. But once you've chosen a new body, you have to remain in the same bodysuit for 100 years at a time, or you could get really bad indigestion. I think we'll keep ours for now, Simon said, nodding at Tanta. I mean, all the dimensions have humans, don't they? Sylvana shook her head. Oh no, D9- has been completely overtaken by reptilians. And now they figured out a way to jump in between dimensions without a passport because they are the most spiritually advanced dimension. They created a massive portal in D1 Atlantic Ocean. They make excellent skin suits, I must say. Very convincing. But humanoids keep being sucked into this blooming portal, and it wasn't even their time to go. Poor souls are being held captive, and we have to keep sending the bravest among us to rescue them. It's very likely that D9- will be destroyed after we rescue all the humanoids from Bermuda prison. But there are so many reptilians hiding in D1. And don't even get me started on their draconian neighbours in D8-. They've been stealing and living off of human energy. That's why most of the humans living in D1 are so fatigued, depressed, and filled with anxiety. Their life source is being stolen on a daily. And how is anyone supposed to achieve anything without energy? I mean, we literally use energy as currency in this dimension. So yes, they're all trying to take over Earth before the dimension gets destroyed. Simon and Tanta exchanged worried glances. Oh, please, can't you keep the ship stick with you until Christmas Eve? What if we accidentally go to a dimension we don't like? Tanta said. Oh, don't worry, you won't. You just have to shake, twist, and double-click. Then the stick will ask you twice over, are you sure you want to go to this dimension? And you just reply with a simple yes or no. Only then does the portal open up. So you see, you surely couldn't go to another dimension by accident. Shake, twist, and double-click. Then confirm twice. Sylvana twinkled. Sorry, Sylvana, just a few more questions. I know you said this doesn't apply to us, but I'm quite curious about how the currency system works around here, Simon asked inquisitively. Well, that's a good question. It's quite a fair system, really. Nobody has a boss or employer. So we calculate how much people deserve to get paid by the amount of energy they put into a task. The more effort that's made, the more they get paid. That way, nobody gets taken advantage of by the system. When they invest into their skills and talents with cheerfulness and enthusiasm in order to uplift the collective, at the end of the day, they simply tap the mobile phone on their third eye and it will convert how much energy they've used into hard electronic cash. That then can be transferred into physical cash if the citizens so choose, because a world without physical cash would be a terrible one. So in conclusion, NEG is the currency. And to those who are ungrateful and neglect their gifts and talents, well, they simply get little to nothing. Of course, we can't prevent lazy or power-hungry souls from trying to exploit others in some way. And believe you me, it's extremely easy to become power-hungry in this dimension. But at least everyone is initially getting paid what they're worth. Sylvana sent the shipstick back into the cupboard, which then uncropped and rotated itself anti-clockwise before locking shut. That sounds so amazing. But I'd rather have free rent, gushed Tanta. Yes, it's a good wee deal, isn't it? Sylvana agreed. And yous can travel to anywhere you like. But just remember that once you've landed at the air portal, before you show them your passports, you must time how long you want to stay at that destination on the app. So on Christmas Eve, just set the timer to 24 hours. And once the timer rings, you will automatically be sent back here. You don't have to do that, of course. You also have the option of going back to the air portal and ask them to send you back home. But I would suggest against that, supposing you lose your mobile phone and end up getting stuck in that dimension. Do you get it? Suddenly, they heard shouting and hollering coming from outside, and the sounds drew nearer and nearer. Pizza storm! Get inside, get inside, get inside! Cried a voice. Looks like the elves have arrived, said Sylvana. Main door, open, she commanded. As the door slid open, a group of elves with cheese and gravy-stained raincoats quickly entered the house. Hi, elves, Sylvana greeted cheerily. Oh, I didn't know we were doing pizza storms now. The elves looked extremely upset. Neither did we. Thank God you made us those raincoats and shoe jackets, Two Brains. I would have been absolutely furious if gravy had gotten on my brand new crepes, said one of the elves, pointing to his trainers. They began to take off their greasy coverings to reveal a very casual yet lavish-looking attire. They were wearing tracksuits and hoodies, complemented with thick chains of steel, titanium, and various other metals around their necks, whilst their fingers were adorned with ginormous black obsidian and gold pirate crystals, matching their various piercings on their pointy ears. And the smell of extremely expensive mustard lightly filled the air, for that is an elf's natural scent. When they spoke, their teeth sparkled, as they were made of white diamonds and yellow gold, with one noticeably light blue tooth among them. Their necks, hands, and several other conspicuous parts of their bodies were covered in tattoos that resembled children's sketches from fairy tale stories. And these tattoos of ogres, fairies, and magical forests appeared to dance and come to life if one stared too long. Them pizza and cake storms are really starting to vex me, Sylvana. I'm gonna need to have a word with the Most High, one of the elves demanded. Calm your temper, elves. You know that circumstances in this dimension are affected by your attitude. Now, I'm in a rush, so... Simon and Tanta, these are the elves. Elves, this is Simon and Tanta. You will all be living and working together under one roof. The elves can supply you with raw materials of anything you ask for. You will have to make everything from scratch though, so you don't get too lazy, which means you can only conjure up raw materials. But you can still have anything you want. Apart from money, of course. The elves began to huff and mutter between themselves. Oh, and one more thing, Sylvana interjected. There is an enchantment spell that has been cast upon all the items and gifts already made, or soon to be made, across all timelines at the bus stop. That means if anyone tries to exchange one gift for another, or pawn it for money, it will automatically turn into dust. So you better be grateful. Sylvana paused and turned to Simon and Tanta. Now, there's a whole 12 elves' names for you to memorize, so I'll leave you to it. Come, one of the elves said. Swamps, drop the beat, brother. Oh, God. Not again, Sylvana muttered under her breath. The elf called Swamps tapped twice on his only blue tooth, and the giant gold speakers situated in every corner of the house lit up and spoke. Connected, they said. Swamps pressed play on his mobile phone device as the elves lined up next to one another, nodding their heads as they waited for their turn to rap over the beat. And Swamps began to mumble.
They call me cloudy and I'm always moving drowsy. If it's not too cold, I go where the wind allows me. They say I'm meek cause I never run my beak, but if you speak too loudly when I sleep, you'll be peak.
The name's Two Brains and I'm the voice of reason, so don't come my way with no beef. Vegan, I'm solving problems, at least by the evening. But if you bring the heat, you'll get roast nose and screening.
It's onion tea, chamomile tea, meditation free. Don't get a panic attack, just relax, breathe and pray, speaking fast.
It's diagonal C, bro of unknown E. If you come for me, it's WWE. Jump and run up a W, twist until I get hyper street. Eat that sugar, we getting tweaked. Now elves smash up the rest of the week. Look to the magical forest, that ain't no tourist, I'ma explore it. I don't need a gal to tour it, she won't get nourished and I ain't no florist. That's why they call me Swamps, cause I'm on it, just sipping on mushrooms, vibes with a trip. Shall we go chase down the drove?
I just got a thief in a bando. He tried to check my flow and Nintendo. I lifted up my crepes, he said oh no. First time he see Taekwondo. I'm Octavius Phantomus. R.I.P. to them hunting us. So beware when you come for us. I make you best friends with their dog.
It's the Elvin MC, OJ Elfie spitting for peace. Ain't no fool, so I'm the OG. Always overqualified on CV. I'll never stop sapping these wrongins. I keep out rapping these youngins. There's no cat, just straight stunting. Doing it steady with freaking rap.
Ayo, it's coins, let me spit some rhymes. No time for crimes, I'm too dripped out in designs. Virgin icy can make any girl mine, but please come nicely, or my card will decline. I'm Sledgy One, I'm a menace on the drum. If you got no rhythm when it's given, it all done. I've grown a ton since I made it from the slums, so no room for excuses, just dancing with the sun. My name is Deet, onion budgie on a beat. You can't compete, so take several seats. They cannot play me, I do detect the seat. They can't change me, I always keep a seat. Hold elves, hold up. We ain't finished yet. Come through. Elf and them, back again. Hide your moan, save your friend. If you see me at your ends, you might pray to God that your soul transcends. Don't do it, don't do it, don't do it, don't do it. I'm in pain, here to explain. It's not worth it. Don't do it, don't do it, don't do it, don't do it, don't do it. I'm in pain, here to explain. It's not worth it. Don't do it.
Woo! Woo! Tanta and Simon applauded. Woo! That was 12 out of 10. Like, wow. Just wow. And your diamond teeth. So dope. Simon turned to Tanta. Maybe you can help me make my teeth look like that for Christmas. Tanta rolled her eyes, whilst the elves fist bumped and gave each other nods of approval. I've never had brothers in any of my lifetimes, said Simon. I think we're all going to get on really well. Huh? What is that? Tanta squealed, pointing toward the open back door. A giant deer was galloping towards them, and it was galloping through the air. Simon quickly raced towards the back garden and slammed the door shut. There was a loud cry of pain as the deer smacked its nose against the clear glass pane and slid down onto the back pavement. My goodness, Simon, what on earth are you doing? Sylvana exclaimed, gliding towards the door. Open, she commanded. The door flung open, and Simon, Tanta, and the elves joined her to gather around the deer. This is literally your form of transportation, guys, scolded Sylvana. They're called reindeer. I'm so sorry, but the last time a deer galloped towards me like that, I was in a really dark place, mentally and emotionally. I got triggered all of a sudden. Simon frowned. Yes, that happens a lot here. That's exactly why we bring souls to the bus stop before we send them out to the next dimension. You literally need to heal from lifetimes of trauma. The reindeer started rubbing its head against Tanta's hand. Oh, its nose has gone all red. It will heal itself. I know. I think I better ask the Most High if I can install an inbuilt censorship into the reindeer's antlers. That way, all doors and obstacles are automatically open and move out of the reindeer's way, making for a much easier travel. So there you go. Everything happens for a reason, and all is well that ends well. But please, guys, make sure you document this injury on the app, Sylvana instructed. I'm so sorry, big fellow, Simon addressed to the reindeer as it rose to its feet. The reindeer tilted its head towards Simon and began to lick his face. Simon giggled. Well, I think I'll take this reindeer for myself, said Elfinem, extending his hands to stroke the reindeer. But the reindeer's nose was tickled, due to the lingering soot that Simon had brought back from the chimney. And just as Elfinem's hands touched the reindeer's nose, it sneezed, splashing giant chunks of yellow and green snot all over him. The elves broke out into shrieks of laughter as the slimy snot slowly ran down Elfinem's face. Oh, so you ugly stupid, Elfinem said to the reindeer angrily. You rude AF. That's what I'm calling you. Rude AF. But his bright red nose is as big as a golf ball, added Elftavius Phantomus. So we call him Rudolph. The elves chortled and congratulated each other for their sense of creativity. The reindeer don't have names yet, do they, Siriana? Cloudsy inquired. Siriana shook her head. No, they don't. That was literally next on your to-do list. Name the reindeer. Oh, this is gonna be cold, Cloudsy said excitedly. Elves never cold, replied Swamps. The elves licked their lips and rubbed their palms together joyfully, ready to name and own their favorite reindeer. The garden was ginormous, with acres and acres of dark green grass, decorated with more unique-looking fruits, trees, and flowers. Lemon trees, mango trees, and coconut trees, as well as dozens of fern trees, stood proudly next to squares of beautiful golden sand pits. And in the middle of the garden was a long, winding red path leading up to a towering gold gate. On either side of the path stood statues of ogres, fairies, werewolves, and leprechauns, for these beings also resided at the bus stop. And some of the statues were carved into water fountains that flowed into a small lake where beautiful swans and ducks paddled. Several reindeer walked or flew around, eating the delicious fruit off of the trees and dancing and playing with one another. That one over there, the one that just dashed that brick over the fence. You see that? That one's mine. I'm calling him Dasher, raved Diagonal C. The other elves nodded with noises of approval. What about that one over there, prancing around the garden, moving bare sus? Swamp said, pointing to an extravagant-looking reindeer sassily making its way to the sandpit. Let's call him Zesty. The elves erupted into more laughter. No, Sledgy One interjected. Sledgy One was known to have this special talent for completely changing the vibe. He always had such a serious-looking demeanor, but was highly respected. He shall be called Prancer, and to that alone shall he answer, he finished quietly. The elves exchanged silent glances. Oh, very good, boss, agreed Teet. You are the real top, eh? The end, said Siriana. So I will leave you all to name the rest of the reindeer. And if you ever need me, just message me on 143. But, guys, if I don't reply back as quickly as expected, please do not under any circumstances follow up the emergency message by texting me lots and lots of question marks. That is so annoying. Okay, bye. And with a wave of her stump, Siriana disappeared. Chapter 6. Simon, Tanta, and the elves named all the reindeer and got to work straight away, as they had copious amounts of presents to make for children all over the world. And all year round, they would get text messages with gift requests, which was sent directly from the children's thoughts. So Simon spent his days practicing how fast he could get in and out of the chimney, trying to break his record speed at each execution. However, as the months went by and Christmas drew closer, Tanta still hadn't quite perfected the most suitable and fitting attire for Simon to wear. One cold winter's night, during let's just break into this random house practice, it was becoming increasingly clearer, both to Simon and to Tanta, that covering one's head with a top hat or a baseball cap whilst trying to get through a chimney was a huge inconvenience. And unfortunately, a simple hoodie wasn't keeping Simon's head warm enough. My head is so cold, Simon chattered. Tanta sat in the centrally heated sleigh, as per usual, designing, knitting, and taking the odd selfie on occasion. Maybe this will keep your head warm for now, Tanta laughed as she placed a freshly knitted Christmas stocking over Simon's large ears. But Simon found it extremely warm, comfortable, and practical. Tanta gazed at Simon with adoration. "Hey, sweetie, look at you looking like Christmas tree. That's my baby. You're looking so twinkly." Simon grinned from ear to ear. "Thanks, Tanta." So Tanta adjusted and tailored the design to meet Simon's needs and made an entire outfit of red velvet stocking material, completing it with the most pulchritudinous design of jet black velvet sneakers embroidered with red, gold and green tinsel, light-up insoles, and glow-in-the-dark shoelace. And she nicknamed them the Sleigh Glides. Once Tanta was finished, Siriana enchanted the outfit, making it expand and decrease to the movement of Simon's muscles. Well, you'll be pleased to know that their first Christmas was a success. Their magical sleigh had the ability to carry and hide millions and millions of gifts without weighing down the vehicle. The sleigh also came with a panoramic convertible roof, a television, a small drink and vending machine, and not forgetting a mobile phone charger. So Tanta would wait inside the sleigh, intensely on the lookout, as Simon delivered the presents to ensure that he never got caught or arrested for breaking and entering. Her supernatural gifts allowed her to view the house from the very first design that was created before the structure was built, when it was simply an engineer's sketch on a piece of paper. So in her mind's eye, she could see all the measurements of the house in square, foot, and dimension. Tanta's supernatural gifts further included being able to see through the walls and doors of people's houses, and also being able to read through the average person's BS. But that was a gift Tanta had long before her days at the bus stop. And so, with her house ray vision, Tanta would guide Simon by directly communicating to him through the earpiece she had sewn into his red velvet hat. So Simon knew exactly which rooms to avoid and which rooms he could enter. And as you can imagine, Simon and Tanta had the most enthralling stories about Simon's encounters with people's pets and other such impediments. However, they always managed to escape just in time. And thus, the legend of Santa officially spread throughout D1, with parents and children all over the globe desperately hoping that they could catch just a tiny glimpse of the man in red.
Simon, you look so beautiful in that hair. Simon, you look so beautiful in that hair.
He in pain would sing. Why do his vocals sound like that? Simon would whisper to the elves. But for several years, none of the elves would respond. Then one foggy day, unknown E finally spilled the tea.
He used to be called E Vain, but now he's just E in pain.
Unknown E said, shaking his head rather sadly.
Back in the other dimensions, he was always stealing, getting into fights, and disrespecting gelfs. But one day, as karma would have it, he messed with the wrong one. He started dating a fairy, you see, and as rumour has it, one day he turned to the fairy and he said, "So how many months are you?" But she wasn't even pregnant. She was just thick.
Oof! Simon winced.
I know. Absolute violation. It's like he had a death wish or something. So she cursed his lips so that he would never be able to speak disrespectfully to anyone ever again. Now every time he opens his mouth, all he can do is sing sad songs in auto-tune.
Unknown E stared sadly at the walls. What? In every dimension? Bit harsh, remarked Simon.
Yes, the curse will follow him everywhere. Fairies are no joke. But hey, it will be a great source of income for all the scientists and doctors in every dimension trying to solve the case of the mysterious illness. Because that's how the universe runs. One man's misfortune is another man's profit.
Unknown E quietly pondered. Yep, that pretty much sums up life in D1. Have you been there by any chance? Asked Simon. Unknown E chuckled.
No way! The consciousness is way too low for elves to survive there. We can only survive in D-3 and upwards, because those are currently the most awakened and highest vibrating dimensions. But a time is coming when a new earth will rise, and all living on Dimension 1 will have visions and finally be able to tap into their supernatural gifts. Instead of flexing on how much money they have, they will find pride in how spiritually powerful they are. Only then can higher light beings live among them.
Unknown E bit into a piece of avocado.
I must say, though, I've heard some pretty funny stories about how humans in D1 perceive elves to be like. They seem to think that we're these overly happy, creepishly clappy, two-dimensional brainless creatures. Like we're some waste elf or something. Quite insulting, really.
So Simon found great pleasure in conversing with the elves, and in their spare time, they would vibe out at the home studio, making beats, then chilling by the fireplace, indulging in mushroom soup, and sipping on that chamomile tea. And Simon would listen to the elves' riveting stories whilst watching their moving tattoos replay their memories from their road elf day. A couple of weeks before Christmas, Coins turned to Simon. When are we going to get paid, Simon? Everybody else who works at the bus stop gets paid. But not everybody else can magically conjure up whatever they want, Simon retorted. Well, it's not good enough anymore. I want to take my girl to the arcade. Teet burst out suddenly. In it, added Diagonal C. The gifts I'm giving to my new girl ain't keeping her satisfied no more. The other day, she asked me for a specific brand of vegan food that I didn't even know how to conjure up. So she asked me to take her to the shop, yeah, and pay for her groceries. I didn't know what to do. But tell me, how can a guff get pleased when elf got no peas for groceries? As the elves began to make noises of disgruntle, Simon and Tanta exchanged worried glances. I want to get a mortgage, Si. I want to live icy, Coins complained. Cloudsy nodded in agreement. You have to admit that all the elfdom living under one roof is starting to look quite sus, he concluded. We want money! We want money! The elves began to shout.
Please,
Unknown E said, trying to calm down the other elves.
Don't get a panic attack, just relax.
Simon gulped as cold sweat began to drip down his forehead. I literally have no idea how to pay you elves, but but hopefully I can come up with something, he finished, attempting to reassure them. Well, you better think fast, Simon, Octavius Phantomus said with wide, menacing eyes. Don't be the Lulu. Simon composed himself. I promise you, elves, just give me some time and I will figure out a way for you to get paid. Alphanem stood up and faced up to Simon, speaking in a low tone. Remember, Simon, there are 3 types of people in life that you don't want to double-cross. And that's a lyricist, a spiritualist, or a sadist. And guess what? Alphanem began to crack his knuckles. I'm all 3. Don't do it, don't do it, don't do it, don't do it. I'm in pain, here to explain. It's not worth it, so don't do it. Ian Payne sang anxiously. Well, if he don't, what makes you think I won't? Sledgy One interjected, turning to Simon. Don't make me pull out the shicky and send man to the next dimenny, he threatened. All right, chill out, mate. How about we give him till New Year's then, Coins suggested. Come on, elves, let's get back to bizzo. Coins and the rest of the elves headed back to the workshop, leaving a distressed Simon. What are we going to do? Whimpered Simon. Maybe we can ask Sylvana, Tanta replied. She grabbed her mobile phone and quickly texted 143. Hi guys, how can I help? Sylvana answered, appearing behind them almost immediately. Sylvana, the elves want to get paid, and you said you can't give us money, and we can't sell or pawn gifts. How on earth am I going to give them a wage? Simon cried. Well, the good news is, I knew this would happen, but surprisingly, it didn't happen as quickly as I thought. They're growing up. Sylvana grinned. Okay, so it's quite simple, really. There is a job centre down the road. Feel free to arrange an interview. They'll give you some great tips on how you can turn your talents into a stable stream of income. But it's gonna take some time and patience on your end. If you're looking for a faster solution, there are quite a few loan companies. But just like every other dimension, you need to have good credit. Which means we would have had to have been making money in the first place, Simon replied angrily. Everyone else at the bus stop has to pay for rent, food and transport. You're extremely privileged, guys, retorted Sylvana. Suddenly she sighed. You'll figure it out. I know it's difficult, but you will find a way. Can't you take the enchantment off the gifts? Tanta pleaded. Unfortunately, that's not possible, said Sylvana. So good luck. She blew a kiss and disappeared. Simon placed his hands on his head and crouched in his feelings of inadequacy. She's useless. This is so frustrating, Simon fumed. How am I going to provide a salary for 12 elves? A throat cleared from the doorway. Excuse me, guys. Simon and Tanta turned around to see Two Brains looking at them curiously. Two Brains! Tanta squealed happily. The self-professed problem solver. Do you think you can help us? Two Brains ushered Simon and Tanta over to the dining table and sat them down. Well, if there's anything I know, it's that dough is not too hard to make when you're in the business of selling dreams. Find a solution to a problem, even if it's not the right solution. Or even better, a temporary solution. That will suffice. Because people are more attached to their pain than they are to truly becoming free. So if you gave them the right and permanent solution to their problem, they'll probably self-sabotage and manifest another problem. So more money is to be made with temporary solutions. Well, being a businessman myself, Two Brains, I'm pretty sure that all creatures, great and small, want a permanent solution to their problems. Because everybody just wants to be happy, Simon articulated. Oh, no, Simon, replied Two Brains. If that was the case, we wouldn't even be down here, bro. We would all be in heaven. Tanta looked confused. I'm not understanding you, Two Brains. We didn't ask to come here. Two Brains burst into laughter. Oh dear, oh dear, oh dear. You humans have a long way to go. Listen to me. The soul is constantly evolving and progressing. It can never stay stagnant. It needs conflict and excitement to grow. Does an eternity of peace and happiness sound like conflict and excitement to you? Tanta and Simon exchanged glances. We're here because paradise got boring, paradise got stagnant, and we started taking the Most High and the Most Highness for granted. When everything was going well up there, we would always end up causing some type of conflict. And the truth is, once we complete these 12 dimensions, we're gonna go back to heaven for a few centuries, get utterly bored again, and asked to come back here. And the more difficult the tests we pass, the higher spiritual ranking we get. You think everyone at the bus stop has supernatural powers like us? No chance. We earn that. Fun fact. Only about 2% of beings at the bus stop actually have these gifts. Plus, we don't have time to sit around playing harps all day. We're in a spiritual war. You know what I'm saying? We have other souls to help and guide, whether we're dead or alive. But of course, when we enter into these dimensions and we lose our memory, we cry and we complain and we say we can't do it anymore. But we literally asked to be here, bro. Wow. But how come you know all of this and we don't? Tanta said. Because I'm different. I'm an elf. And my soul is more advanced than yours. Remember when you told me you used to be a people pleaser? Two Brains said to Simon. Well, the reason why people pleasers always get chosen last is because the soul will always choose the path that challenges and excites them the most over comfort. So we'd rather choose harder lives, harder jobs, and difficult partners over lounging around in heaven all day. The combination of challenge and excitement makes a perfect situation for the soul to evolve. Although too much of one or the other could be potentially detrimental to one's well-being. Put it like this. Good fortune's exciting and bad luck's appalling, but a little bit of both and you're happily evolving. Simon smiled. Thank you, Two Brains. I just thought of the perfect idea. The next day, Simon sat behind his laptop, smiling proudly to himself, finally taking his hands off of the keyboard. Okay, I think it's ready now, he happily said to himself. After their conversation with Two Brains, Simon had thought of a brilliant way to generate a quick income. He quickly proofread his advert before posting it. And this is what he wrote. Do you have bad credit? Or are you having a hard time being approved for a loan due to your non-existent credit score? Don't fear. We are a new company that's willing to loan you up to 1 billion NEG. That's right, 1 billion NEG. With a monthly payback fee of only 0.000000002% interest. All you have to do is send a starting fee of 50 NEG. That's right, only 50 NEG. And you will automatically be eligible to receive payment to your bank account within 10 minutes. That's right, 9 plus 1 minutes. Terms and conditions may apply. Simon pushed away the deafening feeling of guilt, which were currently belting out of key from the depths of his soul. After all, he was living by the words of his D1 late father, Mr. Franson. God helps those who help themselves. And so Simon reasoned with himself. Maybe if I write a clause, I won't feel so bad. So Simon typed at the bottom of the ad with the smallest, most minute of fonts he could find. This is a lie. I will actually be keeping the 50 quid for myself and the elves, whilst you will receive nothing back in return. Really sorry about that. Man's got survival skills. And so he signed it, Sinterklaas, after his great ancestor, so he could hide his true identity. Click. Simon posted the advert up on Lifetree and sat and waited for the customers to reply. Chapter 7. It only took a couple of days before Simon began to receive copious amounts of cash in the post and large amounts of money pinged to his app. Then more money, and more money, and more money, and more money. It worked like magic. Two Brains was right. The business of selling dreams was a quick and easy way to become rich. Blimey, where did all this moolah come from? Coins asked excitedly, as he spread out bands of cash on the table. Oh, so now we live in the high life, Swamps cheerily declared. And there's even more in my bank account, boasted Simon. Two Brains, can you please count all the money together so we can distribute it evenly amongst ourselves? Yes, sir, Two Brains replied. The elves gathered around the table and began to dance and celebrate at the sight of so much cash. But as Two Brains counted the funds, they soon began to argue amongst themselves on who they felt deserved a bonus, based on their contributions. As the elves bickered, Tanta quietly made her way over to Simon. Where did all this money come from? She pressed. Simon was looking oh so fresh, in red jeans paired with white sleigh glides and a white hooded bomber jacket. And on his fingers was his favourite ring, which displayed the word Santa across the knuckles in 24-carat white gold. Simon let out a loud, exasperated sigh. Oh my days, Tanta, why are you always on my case? Like, just relax. You're always nagging and complaining about something. Tanta's jaw dropped. Well, maybe it's because you've changed so much during the last century, Simon. You spend all your time with the elves at the studio making beats. And we just finished making an absolute tune, replied Simon. Sledgy One used to be a famous music producer in his previous dimension, and he makes the coldest beats. Now, what did he call that genre of music he came up with the other day? Oh, that's it! Grime! We made a grime track. And let me tell you, Tanta, the bass was insane. It released the beast within me. Listen to this. Simon cleared his throat, placed his hoodie on top of his head, and began to move his hands. Dressed in red, the pledge credibility. Stuck in a shoot, the photo booth brings smoke, no chimney. Got breathed up, so I G'd up. Know that I'm blessed. Achoo! Get sneezed up. Watch out. Don't cry. Slace was gonna be stopping by. Watch out. Don't cry. Fill up the stocks I got, just make the bells bop. Whoa. Simon waited for Tanta to applaud and sing his praises, but instead, she remained standing with a visibly disgusted countenance. Why are you talking like that, eh? Everybody is a rapper now. And this is the reason why you don't have time for me? I do so much around this house, and nobody even says thank you. I mean, do you even like me anymore, Simon? Simon felt boiling, venomous anger welling up inside of him. Well, what do you expect, Tanta? I'm literally stuck with you for eternity. Tanta stood in shock. Why are you being so cantankerous? I'm not being cantankerous. You're being cantankerous, Simon argued back. No, Simon. You are the one who is being cantankerous. And also, you are very stupid, she finished. Stupid? Bit harsh, Simon replied angrily. So rude. Don't use that language on me again. Hot tears began to roll down Tanta's cheeks. Okay. Sorry for calling you stupid. And with those words, she darted out of the room. Tanta! Tanta! Old J. Elfie called. Are you okay, chicken? Old J. Elfie opened the master bedroom door to see Tanta crumpled up on the floor, weeping. Oh, no, 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 don't cry, he said, coming to comfort her. It's over between me and Simon. Tanta sobbed. No, don't say that. I knew something was wrong. I couldn't help but notice that you and Simon were having a little disagreement, but you can work through this. Old J. Elfie leaned on the wall. You see, Tanta, men are like fairies. They can't exist in a world that doesn't believe in them. So sometimes they might need some time to get away, a place where they can escape, so they can feel like a champion again. Tanta looked up, with tear-stained cheeks. So you mean I'm supposed to just put up with all this foolishness? She cried. Oh, no, 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 not at all. Old J. Elfie looked around the room. Tanta, could you please help me move that chair over there? He asked politely. I should have probably changed to a much younger bodysuit when I got here, but I figured I wouldn't have to do as much work. Tanta laughed through her tears and finally managed a little motivation to get up. Tanta shed a few more tears and finally managed a little motivation to get up. They walked over to a large round golden marble chair and stood on either side. You push this way and I'll push that way, he instructed. So they pushed and pushed, but the large cumbersome chair just would not move. It's too heavy, Tanta said, falling on the round golden chair. She was tired of crying. She was tired of being unappreciated. And now she was tired of trying to move this silly chair. Ask Simon or one of the elves to help you. Old J. Elfie sat beside Tanta. Yes, very interesting observation, he said slowly, chewing on a non-existent piece of gum. You see, Tanta, just as the man is physically stronger than the woman is spiritually stronger than the man. Simon has taken a bit of a fall, and it seems that he's giving in to his shadow side. But the light is still within him. Don't give up on him just yet. He will find his way back. I promise. The Almighty will deal with him. But you must always speak to him with respect, okay? That's your other half. So please be patient. And how long am I supposed to be patient for, old Jay? He seems to be getting worse and worse day by day, Tanta exclaimed. Don't worry, I'll have a word with him. You just keep being your fabulous self. It's time that you stop spreading yourself so thin for everyone and just take some time for you. Now just rest, child. Okay? All will be well. Allow yourself to rest. Old J. Elfie put his arms around Tanta and gave her a long fatherly hug. And Tanta wept and wept from lifetimes of pain, disappointment, and rejection. Chapter 8. It was the eve of Christmas Eve, and the elves were in good spirits, polishing the finishing touches on the gifts, and wrapping and loading them into the sleigh. As everyone prepared for the big day, Simon made his way to the garden to ensure that each reindeer was well fed for the long journey ahead. He had become extremely fond of the reindeer, especially the one they had named Rudolph. Suddenly, 2 of the reindeers galloped headfirst into Rudolph, throwing the large creature backwards into a thorny bush. Following thereafter, the reindeer which the elves named Dancer step ball changed towards Rudolph and completed a perfect double pirouette spin, thus spraying dirt all over Rudolph's lovely fur. The reindeers made laughing and mocking sounds as they galloped away. "Oi, stop it!" Simon exclaimed, rushing over to Rudolph. "That's not very nice." Simon had no idea why the other reindeer treated Rudolph so roughly and so poorly on a daily basis. Sure, he looked slightly different from the other reindeer ever since the accident, but Rudolph's red nose suited him just fine. "Are you okay, Rudolph?" Simon asked, finally making it across the gargantuous garden. Rudolph hopped out of the bush and shook off the mud, wincing in pain from the prickle of the thorns. "Tell you what, how about we go on a little holiday soon, just you and me?" Rudolph nodded and lovingly rubbed his head against Simon's neck. "Simon! Simon!" Simon turned to see old J. Elfie peeking his head out of the back door. "Come quick! I think you need to see this," he said, waving Simon into the reception room. Simon jogged back inside the house and met a worried-looking old J. Elfie holding a letter in his hand. "I'm sorry I opened it. I didn't have my glasses on and I thought it was mine," he said, handing Simon the letter. "No worries," Simon said, slightly confused as he opened it. It was Tanta's handwriting. And this is what she wrote. "Dear Simon, I was deeply hurt by our conversation the other day, and I feel our time together has come to an end. I'm a fine babe, but you are taking my love for granted, and now every day has become not so perfect day. Unfortunately, I will not be delivering presents with you this year. I wish you the best of luck. Tanta. P.S. I know what you did. Remember what your father used to say? God helps those who help themselves. But you seem to have forgotten that God especially helps those who help others." Simon closed the letter and felt his cheeks flush with hurt and shame. "It looks like she also left you a gift," said old J. Elfie softly. He pointed to a relatively small black box decorated with a big golden bow and placed it in Simon's hands to unwrap. Simon opened it to find a pair of 24-carat diamond tooth grills, perfectly molded to the shape of Simon's choppers. "I've been asking for these for decades," Simon sniffled, inserting the top row of diamond grills into his mouth. She was probably scared it would completely turn you into one of us elves. I'm so sorry, Simon. The same thing happened with me and my gelf over 2 centuries ago. One day she just up and left. But of course, there were so many signs leading up to that. Old J. Elfie wiped a tear. We get complacent when we think they'll be here forever, don't we? All it takes is a little daily appreciation. Oh, I must say, Simon, those grills look absolutely fantastic on you. Bling blow! But I must question you, Simon. What exactly did Tanta mean when she wrote, I know what you did? Is there something you're not telling us? Old J. Elfie closely inspected Simon, patiently waiting for a response. Simon gulped and shifted his weight from side to side, trying desperately to push down feelings of guilt once again. Then unexpectedly, out of the corner of his eye, he noticed something. The shipstick! What on earth is the shipstick doing here? He questioned, picking it up from the floor. And it's glowing. That means someone's recently used it, Old J. Elfie concluded. Simon looked at Old J. Elfie with large eyes, while subconsciously holding his breath. Well, it couldn't be one of the elves. We were all just wrapping and loading the gifts, confirmed Old J. Elfie. No, I don't believe it, Simon gasped. She's gone to another dimension. Tanta's gone to another dimeny. By herself. But which one? Old J. Elfie asked in disbelief. Before they could figure out the answer, there was a loud banging on the door. Are you expecting visitors? Asked Old J. Elfie. Suddenly, a frightened-looking Cloudsy stumbled inside the reception room. Why is there a mob of angry people standing outside the front door? Simon felt his soul leave his body. Well, don't just stand there, scolded Old J. Elfie, and with the help of Cloudsy, they dragged Simon into the living room, where they were met with the sound of enraged voices coming from outside. Who did the crime? Swamps asked, looking around. Don't look at me, I haven't committed a crime for time, said Diagonal C. Simon, Two Brains called. How did you make all that money, Simon? Simon took several deep breaths and finally found his tongue. Elves, I've been scamming peeps. Oh, Lord, Cloudsy cried. The elves put their hands on their heads and looked around nervously. And you left up our Addy, you dummy, snarled Sledgy One. Okay, but technically, I explained everything in the clause. I confessed everything in the clause, Simon reiterated. Oh, so they didn't read the clause? Oh, that's okay, then just relax, Unknown-y replied. Well, they are very, very stupid not to read the clause, agreed Teat. So not to worry, we can just sit down with them and have a heart-to-heart. Absolutely, 'cause everybody knows that you're supposed to read the terms and conditions. Cheers to Simon, king of the clause, Coins cheered. Absolute genius, my guy. The elf started congratulating Simon, giving him high fives and encouraging thumbs up. Yeah, come on, they chorused. All of a sudden, a long nail pierced through the front door. It seemed as though it was a break-in that was thoroughly thought through. One of the villagers had brought along with them a drill gun, and slowly but surely began to force a circular-shaped hole through the front door. And as the hole became larger and larger, the chanting and cheering got louder and louder. "I don't think they want a heart-to-heart," cried Cloudsy. Sledgy One took a drumstick out from his pocket and pulled on the edge of it. The elves watched as the stick transformed itself into a long robotic-looking spear. "I've been waiting too long to use this. Let's see if they can get through this." "Run, Simon!" Octavius Phantomus shouted as he got into a combative stance. "We will fight! I will make sure they see these crabs before they see our face." Simon sprinted towards the couch and jumped behind it just as the angry mob of villagers burst through the door. A furious-looking crowd of humans, gnomes, fairies and gelfs, along with a giant ogre, stood before them. "Where's Sinterklaas?" asked the angry villagers. "We want our money back." "We don't know anyone by that name," Swamps answered. One of the gelfs, with an exceedingly muscular physique, decorated with colourful tattoos and long jet-black hair which cascaded down to her waist, spoke up. "I had a premonition last night. The one who scammed us is a human, a male human. I saw him clearly in my vision. He had bright green eyes and was dressed from head to toe in red," she explained. "Oh, you cray-cray. Only elves be living here, stupid," Elfinam retorted. "If that's the case, then why do I smell the blood of a man coming from beyond that couch?" said the 7-foot-tall ogre. "And my nasal radar never lies. Like that time, I caught a human trying to steal my stolen," he finished. "Who's stolen my stolen?" one of the villagers asked. "No, Mrs. Peck. Nobody's stolen your stolen. I'm talking about that time when that guy called Stalin tried stealing my stolen. So what's it gonna be? Either come up from behind that couch, Sinterklaas, or I'll make you part of the furniture." Simon felt his soul leave his body once more. It ain't Sinterklaas behind that couch, bro," Two Brains started. He remembered the nickname that the humans in D1 had given Tanta and Simon. It's Sinterklaas's cousin, Santa." The villagers looked at each other confused. "Santa who?" they asked. "Santa Claus," Coins finished. Suddenly, a frantic Simon leaped up from behind the couch, just as Elfinem drop-kicked the villager with the drill gun. Simon quickly picked up the shipstick and legged it towards the back door, while Sledgy One and Octavius Phantomus fought off the ogre. "Open!" he commanded the door, dashing through the snowy garden and activating the shipstick. Shake, twist, and double-click is what he did. "Are you sure you want to go to D4 minus?" Simon looked behind him and saw the female villager with the long black hair and rippling muscles charging towards him. "Yes, I'm sure!" he shouted at the stick. "Rudolph!" Simon called. "Rudolph!" Rudolph galloped through the air and descended downwards to pick Simon up by its teeth. "But are you really certain?" said the shipstick. "Perhaps consider reading a brief breakdown of current life in D4 minus. Now, are you really sure?" the shipstick asked again. As Rudolph flew low above the garden, the brawny gelf, with veins popping out of arms and neck, jumped onto the branch of a tree, then swung herself up into the air, high enough to catch a hold of Simon's legs. "Gotcha!" she said. "Higher, Rudolph!" Simon screamed as he felt the weight of the female villager dragging him downwards. As Rudolph increased his speed, Simon's shirt slowly began to rip from his teeth. Yes, Shipstick, yes! Simon screamed. Please, take us to D4 minus! Suddenly, a huge gaping purple hole emerged from the stick, swallowing them up in an instant, and with the flash of a light, they were gone. The Legend of Santa Claus. This is the story of Tanta. Drink water and lime juice every day. Written, produced, and performed by E.T. Wartemberg.